but will I be able to see anything?
Okay.
Good.
Ich fange jetzt an. I now start the second day and welcome everybody who joined us via stream to this conference, Dynamic Practices, Static Terms. Today is the day of the country report, and you already see Anna Sepesh with me and her colleague, Mate Gaspar. You see via screen, so we also have this format, which we also didn't choose deliberately. It came to us that Mate is doing the country report together with Anna, and he is here via Zoom, and Anna is here in person. It has this good advantage that in the debates afterwards, you will have Mate in your Zoom discussion, and we have Anna here. So, looks a little bit like planned, wasn't. So, I want to warmly welcome the two and say some words about them. So, Mate Gaspar is a cultural manager, university lecturer, and NGO expert. Between 1998 and 2010, along with Abad Schilling, he was the co-founder and director of Hungary's internationally acclaimed independent theater company. And now, please, Anna, could you say it? I'm pretty sure that I can't spell it properly.
Krétakör.
Krétakör. Oh, wasn't that difficult? Okay. The past decade, he's been equally involved in the art sector, education, and civic life. He served as the deputy of the Arts and Culture Program of the Open Society Foundations for 4 years. As the director of a major Hungarian family foundation, whose mission is providing Roma people with equal chances, he's been working for a more solidary and inclusive society. Since 2014, he taught art mediation and management at the University of Theatre and Film Arts in Budapest, where he always became head of art, theory, and mediation department and member of the Senate. In reaction to the forced transformation of the university from public institution to a private foundation, he resigned from all his functions and decided to leave the faculty as of September 30th, 2020. So, warm welcome to Mati, and warm welcome also to Anna Sepesh, who graduated as a drama instructor and theater film arts university Budapest in 2017. Since that, she has been using drama and theater as a tool of education and social change, holding workshops and taking part in different projects with schools, theaters, and NGOs. She was the co-leader of the educational department of Trafo House of Contemporary Arts. She has been working with marginalized groups in the countryside of Hungary. She has created community theater pieces together with teenage and adult groups based on their own stories. She has been playing as an actor drama teacher in theater and education plays and organized an international art education meeting in Budapest and much more. So this is just part of what the two are doing, but I think a good introduction and clarifying their position. So now you know with whom you're talking and who is talking to you, and I'm very, very happy to give the floor to the two of them. So, warm welcome.
Thank you very much, and Mate will
Thank
give
you
a structural introduction to the whole applied theater in education field in Hungary, so please focus in that direction.
Yes, thank you, Ulrika. Thank you, Anna. It's great to be with you, even though it's, I have to admit that it's quite strange from this distance, this remote way of contributing. And I know that I'm not the only person to be remote, but many of you are all around in front of different screens, and I just can but hope that technically it will be fine and you will be able to see and hear us. we prepared with Anna a presentation for you about with the country report from Hungary that I will start sharing with you right now, and I just would like to have a sort of feedback from Anna or from the technical team whether it's okay, whether you can see that. Is it is it on?
It's on. However, we don't hear you quite well. Could you give us a second to check on that?
Yeah, of course, of course. And I just keep on talking for the sake of technical checking. And
Actually, it's already much better.
okay, give me a sign if I can start. And
Sign is given.
good, thank you very much. Uh, so um, so it will be a one woman, one man show. Two of us will share the floor and exchange from different views. And this is very simple. Why we do so? Because we are from different generations and with different experiences. As Ulrika mentioned, Anna was a student in my first uh, class at the University of Theatre and Film Arts, and I'm very glad that ever since she could continue her studies at Salzburg, and also she's been an active member of the field. So I thought that it would be appropriate to give practical examples and concrete information about what's going on in Hungary in this large field of educational theater, while I prepared a sort of big picture theoretical and structural background of that. So that's how this presentation is shown and structured. I have to say also that we are both approaching this subject from the theater perspective, although it would be absolutely legitimate to do so from the pedagogical uh, work. But we both come from the theater field and use um, pedagogy and the pedagogical approach from the artistic perspective, which will open room for many discussion, of course, as it is happening in Hungary, and I think in many other places in that profession. So, um, if I very briefly and personally or subjectively introduce the Hungarian theater development, the three big stories in the last 3 decades from the change of the system in 1990, I would say that the first decade in our new uh, political era was characterized in the theater by the reinforcement of the institution. During the communist era in Hungary, a very large and solid structure of institutional theaters was developed, and after the change of the system, this the reinforcement and consolidation of this structure was the first priority, and because of this structure really survived the very harsh political and social change. It characterizes the Hungarian theater landscape ever since, and it will be an important factor in my presentation as well. In the 2000s, so the first decade of the new millennium, parallel to this very strong and structured institutional field, the so-called independent scene um, strengthened a lot, and it was really a very flourishing period of this scene with many newcomers and many young initiatives. I was lucky to be, as Ulrika also mentioned, be an active part of this with our company, Kretakör, founded by Arpad Schilling and run by myself. But besides Kretakör, many other important companies and artists became important players in the theater field, not only in Hungary but internationally. And for many reasons, this wave of new artistic approach, and new aesthetic, and new social commitment as well as when it comes to what art is there for and how it should be used in society. So this new approach was on its top, or on the top of its recognition by the end of this decade, and for many reasons, then it sort of declined, and nowadays it's in a much more difficult situation than it was, for instance, 24 years ago when we started. And the recent decade. So if we want to point out one important development in the field, it's really the flourishing of the educational theater scene. So this is this is very fortunate, because like that we can tell you about this scene much more than we could have discussed, let's say, 10 years ago. A whole new series of developments characterize this last decade. What makes a golden age? So if I would say that the last decade was the golden age of the educational theater in Hungary, what would be the three benchmark of that? So one important benchmark, as we are speaking here in an academic context, it's the research and the structured reflections that that happened in that field for the first time. The second is, of course, all the developments and new phenomena in the different practices, and the funding scheme, which made it also possible with new sources. And the third very important aspect is the new perspective of professionalization and training formats. So these are the three aspects I will talk a little bit more about. So the first, the research and structured reflection. What happened in the field? The first milestone was in 2010, when a very impressive EU-funded research project was published. It was a two-year-long project with 12 countries participating. So it was a very truly European, even more than European project, with Palestine, for instance, involved in that as well. And it was an observation-based project which wanted to analyze and prove by systematic qualitative and quantitative data that drama has a positive effect on the development of the five key competencies according to the Lisbon criteria. And why I quote this research here as a Hungarian experience, it is because the lead of this consortium was the lead partner was a Hungarian organization, Kava. We will mention this company several times later, and the head of this research program, Adam Ciboy, who is a very important professional of this field, currently living and working in Bergen, Norway, as a professor at the pedagogical university there. So it was one of his major research work and contribution to the recognition of this field as a truly scientifically explored discipline. The second milestone is also attached to his name, and together with another important Adam Betlenfalvi, who who made his drama and education, theater and education studies, and doctorate in Great Britain in Manchester, if I'm not mistaken. So they made a survey on the programs that could be classified under the large umbrella of educational theater in the season of 2012 2013 throughout Hungary, and it was a huge surprise that they could enlist more than 170 programs offered by more than 120 organizations in that field. So this was the moment when when the whole profession realized how big it is and how important and influential it can be. And then because this research also raised a multitude of professional questions about what are these programs, how to describe them, how to qualify them, how to evaluate them, how to group them. So a very intensive period of professional reflection and debate started with dozens of conferences, networks, workshops coming to life. And the result of all these professional exchanges, which pretty much strengthened the whole field, evolved towards a new important volume, another handbook, which was published in 2017 on educational theater and theater pedagogy. And this title already shows the big dilemma that developed throughout the whole profession in Hungary, in the terminology issues, and also what's behind these terminological issues, how the members of the profession, how the practitioners, artists, pedagogues, lecturers, and students, how do they identify themselves and what kind of practices they get involved in. And in this handbook, many recommendations and a whole new strategy for the field was presented with a 5-year long strategic plan, aiming to put educational theater pedagogy on the scene as an autonomous and new discipline. So this is the first benchmark. The second benchmark is the praxis and funding. So I refer to this large and very stable institutional theater network in Hungary throughout the country. And I can say that today there is no important city or state theater which would not have important educational theater program or even department, which is absolutely a new development in the last decade. So I can say that even if it's not that systematic and that political as in Germany or in the German-speaking countries, but pretty much embraced by the institutions, the idea and the practice of that somehow some kind of educational theater program should be part of their work. For the independent organizations, working with and for young people, young generations, students, getting into the schools, inviting school groups to cooperate, it became a sort of new market and a new audience to get in touch with in difficult times, as I also mentioned that in the 2010s, the horizon for the independence became less and less promising. So it's also a reason that they turned to these new possibilities of playing for and working with new audiences, which led, by the end of the day, a whole new range of practices that Anna will show us in this level of Hungarian theater makers. And the third important aspect, the funders, many funders, from the EU funds to through the state's funding and cultural foundations and even private donors, thought that it's a trendy new goal to invest in. So they offered more and more funds to this field. It was also a sort of new legitimacy for their work that here we go for new um, new initiatives, and we can contribute to the enlargement of the public services or artistic research. And the third aspect I would like to briefly mention is the professional aspect and training aspect. So for a long time, it was a real learning by doing experience for all the practitioners. Beforehand, there was no training or no real consensus about what educational theater professional should be aware of and good at. So many individual careers with sometimes fantastic, sometimes less fantastic results could be observed throughout uh, the the country. We had traditionally a few short vocational trainings that attracted massively interested people, teachers, amateur theater practitioners, and so on. So they could get acquainted with the bases of this profession, mainly rooted in the British tradition that I will briefly mention later on. The real turning point was in 2014 when in our university, the University of Theatre and Film Arts, which is in a sort of monopole situation in the field of art education in these two fields, launched a new whole new institute and a whole new study branch with art mediation. And in this art mediation institute, the first BA program, which was called drama instruction, and Anna was member of the first class, was launched, and ever since nowadays the third class graduates in that program that I was part of as well. And within the same school, in the doctoral school, more and more outstanding professionals were accepted and enrolled with their research programs, and the last 2 years we already had them successfully finishing their doctoral studies. So we have now a couple of professionals in the educational theater field with doctoral grade and with this highest level educational credit. So when I talk about educational theater in Hungary, it's a really large and very varied sector. Traditionally, many students from Scandinavia and Asia come to Budapest, Hungary, to observe in study trips the variety of the practices, because it's really rare that here you can really find a little bit of everything. And what is the little bit of everything? The three main sources I would just quote. The first, that we have our own drama tradition, which is present from the early 17th, and which is based or really based on games and exercises, which seeks to enhance skills and develop children's personal capacities, and also offer them little role games or situations where through improvisation they can live what if situations. The other, and it's still very present for the last 50 years. The other, which came to us in the mid 80s, and Hungary was really one of the most adaptive places to the British tradition. So the DIE and the TIE methodology and the work of big classics like Jonathan Nealance and Dorothy Heathcock, or Gavin Bolton. Later on, David Davis or Chris Cooper. So these works and these methodologies were highly appreciated and adopted in the practice, and these mm, world famous British practitioners are also, or have been, regularly coming to Hungary, giving master classes and workshops. So their praxis is very much an influential part of our educational theater tradition. And we have at least two important professional companies which were based on this methodology, and which are active ever since the early 90s and the early 2000s. Kerekasztal Roundtable is one of them. It was the first one, and Kava is the other one, highly trained professionals in that field. And the third, the youngest tradition, is the German tradition, the Theaterpädagogik, which get known in Hungary because our theater system institutional network is quite similar to the ones in German theaters, and this very impressive mission and practice that have been developed in German theaters turned out to be of very impressive and impactful for similar Hungarian institutions, and this was one of the reasons why this whole phenomena spread throughout the country. And with that, now I give the floor to Anna to give you concrete examples. And just tell me, Anna, when shall I switch
Okay.
the presentation?
Thank you very much. I hope you are still with us, because this is a huge picture. And we like to say that we have the widest range of theater education programs in Europe, but I guess you will claim that too. As from my perspective, I would like to share how are these main practices of theater education are shown in the drama instruction studies. So these three main branches of German, Hungarian, and British traditions. And first, this is drama pedagogy. This was like the basic set of our studies. We learned hundreds and thousands of drama games, and also methods how to combine them into thematic structures and lesson plans. You can go, Mate. And just as an example, where can this lead? Like in schools or in school contexts, drama teachers are working with this methodology with groups of teenagers or groups of primary school students. And in Hungary, there's a national student theater meeting each year annually, where thousands of school students are showing their final presentations of their plays done by drama pedagogical methods. And it is also a competition where the jury is put together by theater education and drama pedagogy experts of the field. But mostly like a very nice get-together and encounter to share these different practices. And drama in education, as Mate mentioned, was brought in from the UK. And it's mostly used in school contexts as well, where the leading drama teacher is showing or creating a fictional story together with the participants, and they are, through this fictional story, observing some real problem or dilemma of life. And this picture was chosen from Kava Company. This lesson was presented to us during our studies, and it's dealing with the bullying and after effects and reasons of bullying. Theater in education is actually a very similar format, mostly done by independent theater education companies now in Hungary, but it's also combined with proper theatrical scenes. And the main part of it is that these theatrical scenes and the interactions and conversations with the participants are equal in the dramaturgy. So together they put together the story, and there is no separation in between these closed scenes and then the open interactions with the participants. This way they can become part of it, and they can step in roles and live the experience through this project. And the chosen picture is from one of the most famous plays by Kerekasztal Theatre in Education Company. It's about power structures played for primary school students, and it's the famous story of the emperor's new clothes. And looking into the theatrical or institutional field, we had a half-year internship in different state theaters of mostly Budapest, and there we could observe workshops and talks connected to the repertoire of these big theaters. These structures, I guess, are more familiar with you here too. But there were several other tools to get the audience familiar with theatrical tools and also use the repertoire as a starting point for further conversations and for creation processes. Creation processes like the youth clubs, which are also part of the main big art theaters in Budapest and in the bigger cities of Hungary. These pictures are chosen from Trafu and Katona József Theatre, and one of the most interesting project or process that I happened to observe during my studies, you can skip Mate, was a combination of a youth club and a social project, which was connecting two very different groups, like one group in the State Theatre of Katona József Színház, and the other group in a very segregated village, Roma village of Hungary. And these two groups were working based on the same topics and same structures and same drama pedagogical tools. And each weekend they met either in Budapest or in the countryside. They even did summer camps together, and they tried to create around their lives and somehow connect these very different lives together. And the curiosity of this project, it was not only a drama pedagogical or a theater educational project, but combined with Autonomia Association, which is an NGO in this area of Hungary. They also provided a bank for the women of the village where they could deal with money issues, and they also founded their own association for selling their products, and they could collect money for repairing the houses, which was also then done together with the children and the youngsters of Budapest. So it was like a long-term collaboration. But for these projects, first of all, you need the German money, and second of all, you need a lot of time. So this was going on for 5 years until we reached at the point that there was an actual theater outcome, not only just playing football and playing drama games and going for hikes, and there was an actual social intervention or outcome on a social level. And it's also somehow connected to Salzburg, as we also have a drama laboratory here at the university, which is a practicing field for the ones studying here applied theater. And we had a very similar structure that the first drama instruction class started to build up. And the fun part of it was that we could combine these very different methodologies that we practiced during our studies. So we could connect to the main stage of the Theatre and Film Arts University, work together with other faculties, and create post-show discussions after the directing exams of the other students, or we could do our own classroom theatre plays, which went on the repertoire, or we created debate theatres based on interesting topics that were somehow raising up in the institute. And we also appeared in summer festivals, which was somehow integrated us in the structure of the university and also in an acceptance level of this field of applied theatre and drama instruction. And I'm giving the word back to Mate as soon as we will hear him.
Yes, here I am. Thanks. Yeah, a few more theoretical points, because this whole issue is also about the social recognition of these practices. So, in order um, to really establish structures and being becoming able to think of this field as a real profession and a real discipline, uh, the social recognition is needed from the professional circles of pedagogues and theater makers, and also in the larger sense. And so it's the last 10 years can be also described as a sort of fight for emancipation and institutionalization. Um, and what um, what are the steps, or what have been the steps of that? So clearly, in our society, there is a sort of strict hierarchy, which is not that evident to transgress and change. Uh, if you think back to the three main sources I was referring to, the Hungarian tradition present since the early 70s was mainly developed in through informal educational practices in cultural settings. So on the one hand, it was somehow widespread, but on the other hand, it was absolutely somehow alternative or underground or grassroots initiatives with not that much social value attached to that. Um, when the British tradition came into or the influence came into the picture in the 80s, 90s, there was a sort of institutional interest from the educational sector towards these practices that were considered as non-formal learning formats. And back that time, in the last years of the communism and the first decade of the new regime, the educational structure, which is an important component of our social building, was open to that, and it also somehow explains why these tendencies or practices could become influential. Of course, it has also changed the last 10, 20 years, but still, we still remember, and the traces of that influence survives. And the third important wave of influences which came with this German practice of theater pedagogy, and which targeted the artistic setting. So our strong network of city and state theaters, and has been developed through the quite fashionable format of art mediation, was the most successful, simply because of this artistic cultural infrastructure and setting is the most renowned or socially most recognized and valued compared to the previous ones. So it also explains you why it could have a relatively big effect in a relatively short time. So in a society like the Hungarian, which is I would qualify as a somewhere between pre-modernism and modernism, but absolutely not according to the Western standards of postmodern liberal democracy. This kind of institutional, this kind of social hierarchy reflected in the institutional setting is very influential and plays a big role. and it also will explain why what you call or what we call applied theater could not become that important and that overwhelming, because the artistic intervention in social context, uh, which is in the focus of the applied theater practices, is not that much valued, or at least not as valued as what's happening within the official institutions of art, of the art world. But I will talk a little bit more about it later. So this hierarchy, so this emancipation process and the hierarchy is very much reflected in the terminology debates, which are ongoing, and I think will never come to an end in our profession. So whether we prefer learning in theater or learning through theater. So this is the main issue, whether theater is a tool of our experiences, or whether it's a sort of source and aim as well. So what is the relationship between the aesthetic experience and the rediscovery of construct, or the reconstruction of knowledge schemes? It's very very personal, I think, on the one hand, and it's also very much depending on simply which kind of group or institution you are affiliated with. But because it's a report about Hungary, I have to report that this is a very big debate, and sometimes it's not only a constructive exchange of ideas and experiences, but a sort of either or question as well. And also it's something that is represented also within the university framework, when we think about hierarchies of disciplines and practices, and when we discuss about how and to what degree participants should be involved, or whether it's better to keep the safe border between the so-called audiences and the so-called presenters or artists or actors. So this debate is absolutely not over, and currently the tendencies are really, or rather, going backwards towards the traditional settings. And with that, back to Anna.
Thank you. However, it's not an over debate. I think the current projects that are appearing in the past years are very diverse in this sense too. So I will talk about this later, but a bit back to what Mate said. So like the biggest branch now is artistic mediation in the art field. So most of us, after our drama instruction studies, found our main jobs, because you never have one job, in state theaters, or me, for example, theater that belonged to the capital. And there are a lot of advantages coming with working for a theater or working for an institution, especially the ones who went to the theaters where this German tradition of theater pedagogy was already built into the system. But those like me who joined theaters where they had a very big wanting of these programs, but they never had the structure before, or never had at all colleagues who did this work. It was a constant negotiation on positions, on money, and on formats that we can use or not. And I really like this picture because it's showing very well that it was a day-to-day business when we even didn't get a space for rehearsals, because it wasn't considered a program when the main actors had to do their main rehearsals on the main stage. But also a lot of freedom. Like this theater I joined, it's not only a theater but a contemporary art place of international productions and young Hungarian artists. So there's a gallery space and a dance studio, and we were able to formulate like new formats or new methodologies connected to these practices. And as nobody knew what theater education was, we were completely free to do how we liked, which is also a dangerous situation if you think over it. Okay, and looking into the other field, I think the one before, yes, of how did you tell it, Mati? Social interventions or theater in social contexts. This was my other kind of field, and many of my colleagues also worked in social contexts or in smaller towns, mostly using theater of the oppressed techniques. That is a very challenging thing, as I mentioned before, because of the timing, because you need to invest a lot of time and attention if you want to be really present in these villages. And the state system is completely neglecting these parts of Hungary. So basically what you are doing is filling the gaps of the system, and you are investing your time into this is not a nice word, but helping communities who cannot help themselves and providing them tools which are completely accessible in Budapest, for example. And this project, just a sentence about it, was an international one because many of the companies or collectives working in the social field have many international connections, mostly because these can use formats that are non-verbal, because non-verbal formats are easier to access for many communities. So this is a summer academy with professionals from puppetry, from dance, from circus arts, and they are all coming to this village to share their practices with the villagers, and at the end they create the festival called Gypsystan from the outcomes of these projects. And the generational gap was also mentioned before in between the professionals who learn by doing and the professionals who were formed in the past years in this upswing of theater education in Hungary. But luckily, after finishing the university, there are still a lot of opportunities to keep up, to develop your skills as a professional, and especially if you have a responsibility towards an institution because you are the only colleague who is able to do the educational projects, it's very nice but also time consuming to attend these regular forums and regular conferences, and you are also able to access foreign practices. I'm talking about 1 to like huge national events per month, so it's like really an advantage to be part of this young professional group or the professional group of theater education in Hungary, because you always have opportunities to get access to further education. And just to mention a few examples, there is a forum which is also organized by Kava Theater Education Company, where there are keynotes and sharing of the current researches in the field, and also workshops by, with, and for the professionals in between each other to share the practices they are using. And we were also there when the Bible was born, this handbook of theater education and theater pedagogy practices, taking part in the negotiation around strategies, around qualification or certification systems, and around the terminology, which is a very important issue to make this independent discipline.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and just coming back to this applied theater notion, because personally, I was also at one point a few years ago very confident that this terminology debate could be somehow be solved by the adaptation of this internationally recognized term, which is of course very large and englobing, but still would somehow connect us to the international practices. And as Anna also referred to, we have a wide range of different practices, from therapy to development purposes, practices that target individuals or specific groups, like prison inmates or handicapped people, or also communities as inhabitants of a whole village as well. So we have all that, and we also have very different practices according to the degree of involvement, whether we work for or with uh, members of these groups and collectives, or whether the projects are designed and devised by them. We have examples, even though not that many, but some examples for all these um, practices. But still, it could not become the solution for the terminological and professional issues. And why? On the one hand, because there is a very strong resistance from the theater profession towards any kind of instrumentalization of the arts. So to put it simple, to use theater for this kind of developmental purposes is considered to be of lower interest than to use them for proper scenic representation. Um, Second, reason is that this socially engaged intervention is is not that welcome by the society or by the citizens of our society in large. So it's also somehow uh, considered as the strange hobby of foolish people who want to be solidary and open towards the the needy ones. So it's absolutely not mainstream and recognized. Sorry, I just skipped. And the third quite important reason is that the artistic quality is predominant, and if you cannot assure that the artistic component of these works and proposals is aesthetically um, good enough, then simply your work will not be recognized. And of course, there is a sort of uncertainty about how to make sure that the artistic quality and aesthetic experience of these practices can be equal to works rehearsed during weeks and months within the safe conditions of proper theaters.
So that's not surprising that these applied theater practices that I will just quickly bombard to you, like one sentence each, these are mostly carried out in independent companies and not under institutional backgrounds, except for the first one, which are giving voice to the ones who are taking care of the needy. Excellent Workers, it's a Bürgerbühne production of Örkény Theater, the first one there. And the uniqueness of it is that these persons who are having caretaker professions are telling their own stories in a documentary format, but the actors of the company are also present on stage, helping as a choir and underlining these stories with artistic formats. And yes, also about the representation of professions. This is a true amateur theater company. They are running on for 30 years, and they are based in a small village not far from Budapest, and they have like children theater groups from where they are all coming from, and then they stay together and they have this non-hierarchical format to create plays about their lives. So, for example, many of them are pedagogues, and this play that they performed was about the educational structures in Hungary through their own stories. And they also create community events for the villagers. And this project is kind of a famous one, or whoever has been in Dresden Bürgerbühne Festival might have seen it. Yeah, I see the hands in the air. Thank you. I mean, it's not my fame, but theirs. So these incredible women are actors, activists, players, humans of own theater. They are coming from also a small village from the east side of Hungary. And with this company, they work together with the tools of sociodrama for years, and also with the tools of digital storytelling. And they recorded their own stories, mostly connected to birth giving and the healthcare system of Hungary. And then they staged this play, which was a fictional birthday of one of them. And through that, they reported about their lives and struggles. And another socially engaged project was carried out by Stereoact and Perforum, which is also connected to own theater. Here they went to a very segregated village and give media arts and film tools for the villagers to record their own lives. So this way they created a community-based participatory documentary film with and about the citizens of the village. And also, like other formats, very usually coming into these projects, so I cannot put these terminology names on them. This is a dance experiment with elderly people in an independent theater in Budapest, where the audience are also becoming part of this dance, and where the journals of their bodies in different formats are exhibited in the space. So the audience can join the dance, can add their opinions on different papers and different formats, and can interact with the dancing bodies of these people. And again, dancing, but with youngsters. These TIE productions, theater and education productions, started to inherit or engage with other art forms. So, for example, there are now TIE productions combined with puppetry, and this is a production where the National Dance Theatre and this TIE company work together, and they are not only inviting the people to express themselves by verbal tools, but also by dancing and by movement, which is quite incredible, especially when you are playing to 13 years olds. And towards physical theater and less of interaction, this independent project was dealing with the topic of femininity and the queendom in my word, using different physical theater formats and also ending up as drag kings and interacting with the audience. This is where the laboratory of the university ended. This is a collective formed out of drama instructors of the next year, so not us. And they are creating this digital consciousness and media consciousness series of workshops for high schoolers, because fake news and fake realities are quite a topic now in not only Hungary, I guess, as I see your faces. And they are dealing with actual topics and actual news of the past week, and they are reforming it, representing it with digital tools and with the tools of sociodrama. And I think last but not least, also coming out of the university laboratory, but the next class, they are creating this democratic playground, which is an ongoing event with the formats of debate theater and theatrical board game, but it is also a parliament simulation where the audience or where the participants can form imaginary parties, but based on the actual working of representative democracies. So this way they can actually practice how to be democratic and how to lead an election. And joining back to the reality, I consider the Free SFA movement also as kind of applied theater or applied arts on the streets and in the public spaces of Budapest. So this picture was taken during the occupation of the building. And here, which is again in the set story a big advantage that the students of different faculties could work together and create very shouting and outstanding art pieces through the protests and through the forums of the movement.
Okay, and just a final slide, last word about the perspectives. It's strange enough, but all these cycles of big stories last for 1 decade, apparently. As I mentioned to you, the early 2000, which was about the independent theater, and by the end of the decade, the independent theater situation worsened considerably. We have the feeling now that the same applies to the educational theater field. So the perspective for the new decade are not that promising. Just shortly, 3 reasons why it could be so. On the one hand, this self-definition process, so this very active inner professional debate is somehow stuck. So the strategy I was referred to has not advanced ever since, because of lack of many resources, energy and time and also money and funding for that. So we haven't done enough from within the community to make the next step. We can also witness the quite evident withdrawal of the central support. So the fundings which were more abundant a few years ago are now cut back, and it can also be one can also see some political reasons behind these behind that. And last but not least, the academic background we could be so proud of from 2014 on, with the change of the ownership system of the university, is also seriously endangered, and we just don't know how this drama instruction studies will whether it will be continued, and if yes, by whom and how. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mate.
So thank you very much to Mate Kaspar and to Anna Sepes for these impulses and inputs and offerings for debate. So we put this in our sack pack. As you would have realized, we are already over the time, but this doesn't matter as we still have time, and we just rearrange a little bit. So we continue now with a country report from Poland. You see already Stanislav Godlewski at my side, and we will just see how it works out in terms of time, and then we will perhaps start after lunch break 20 minutes later or something like this. So we never meant to be perfect, and you see already that it works. I now take some minutes to introduce Stanislav Godlewski to you. So Stanislav is a theater critic, he's a theater researcher, and he's a theater historian. He graduated at the university in Poznan and works in the Institute of Art in Polish Academy of Science. He's a member of the editorial team of a journal which I prefer spell in English language, as I'm not really good in Polish. So this is a theatrical memoir, an academic journal devoted to the history and historiography of theater and drama. And so this is Stanislav's approach also to this wide field of performing arts in context, to use this umbrella term once more. So I'm so happy that you're here in person with us, and now give us an insight in what happens in Poland in terms of our field. So.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me for this conference. I'm so happy to be here, and it's really inspiring and great. And in my presentation, I will briefly tell you about the theater system in Poland and show the history of performing arts in context. And to do that, I will use different static terms that covers dynamic practices. And of course, the terminology in Polish is very diverse, and I will use only few terms that I think are the most inspiring, probably the most flexible, and include different practices, strategies, approaches, and so on. In Poland, the main and the dominant circuit of theater is the public theater system. And the system of public theater in Poland began at the 18th century when the king built the first professional public theater, and he defined its mission to modernize the country, to educate, and to theater as a tool of enlightenment the society. And soon the public theater began to be the space not only of education and modernization, but also of performing, presenting, and representing the conflicts. So public theater in Poland is, on the one hand, the tool of education, but also the space of an agon, of a conflict, of representing the issue that are important for society. And in some way you can tell that public theaters in Poland always inevitably was critical and political. And that sense of mission lasted in Polish public theaters to these days, of course, not everywhere and with different modification. In terms of performing art in context, we have also a tradition of alternative theaters, performance art made in public spaces, participatory projects made in local communities, and it's probably from the 80s of the 20th century. And of course, after 1989, the international exchange and contact with foreign companies and artists enriched Polish practitioners. On the festivals we were able to see, for example, Teatr Dok, Rimini Protocol, Public Movement, and so on and so on. So we educate how different countries do that. And back to the system and jump to 2021. Polish theater system includes right now around 120 public theaters. That means 120 theaters financed by the state or the city with the permanent full-time employed actors ensembles. And after 1989 and the economical transformation, Polish theater system still deals with the structures left after the communist system. In short description, that means that the institutions are over-bureaucratic, focused on using the institutional resources, and so reluctant in providing experimental practices, unwilling to employ actors and performances from outside the institution. In that way, all of that performing arts in context are in some kind of paradoxical but very interesting position. They have to be very flexible and inventive in using and hijacking the system, looking for alternative spaces and resources, and being inside and outside the main system of theaters, and they are some kind of always alternative and ephemeral. And of course, public theater, in order to complete their mission that I told you about, to be the tool of education and representing the conflict, often use performing arts in context, theater pedagogy, participatory project, but they making it more like an events that are and not the long-term activity. You can gain money for a special project, event, or a festival, but there is a little chance that you can gain money for continuing the work. So very often this performing art in context projects are short-lasting, focused on making the final product, a performance or a workshop, not on an artistic process itself. And there is no money for exploitation, so after a few shows, the project is disappearing. And that, of course, is slowly changing, and also because on the universities and art academies, more and more students are interested in making an art outside the official system. They are believing that representation matters in art, and that theater can be a tool to fight with hegemonic, capitalistic, white, male, heterosexual, non-disabled system. So at the Warsaw University, there is a 2-year study program of postgraduate studies, theater pedagogy, coordinated by Justyna Sobczyk, who Justyna sends her best regards. She couldn't be here. Their students are learning not only the different theories of theater pedagogy, but also drama techniques. They have classes with psychologists, choreographers, and so on and so on. And as their diploma, they have to make a practical project, a performance, or a series of workshops. Theater pedagogy in Poland is still kind of a fresh thing. Actually, Justyna was the one who introduced us to this to this thing. She studied in Berlin, and I will talk about lots of her activities later also. So we are looking up at the Germany. Now more and more public theaters hire theater pedagogues for a full-time job to make the public theater not only a space of producing and producing performances, but also to educate the audience, make special projects for different local groups and so on. And there is in Warsaw also a Theater Pedagogues Association, and since 2010 they are making their own projects and performances, but also working with cultural institutions in whole Poland. They also write and translate text about theater pedagogy. They have like the archive of the articles and documentaries, and they have very good website. You can check it, pedagodzeteatru.org. Dorota Ogrodzka, one of the founder of this association, defined the theater pedagogy aim as not only to make artistic, social, activist, and political project, but also to take the advantage of the fact that theater is special because it contains all of the human emotions, unlike any other institution as school or public sphere in general. Theater can contain not only the good emotions, but also the bad ones that can work with different affects in a very, very different ways. And that brings us to the key term, I think, that theater is a space for creating relations and unexpected alliances. And that's the goal of theater pedagogy and theater pedagogues associations. The other term, inclusive theater, is connected with two different people and two different places. First is Agata Siwiak, curator of performing arts and inventor, founder of the pioneer program Wielkopolska Rewolucje. Wielkopolska, it's a region in Poland, Wielkopolska revolutions, like Matrix revolutions, yeah. And the program was based on the idea, the main idea of this program was that very avant-garde, posh artists from Warsaw or Kraków are coming to small villages and cities in Wielkopolska and start working with local communities, institutions and NGOs, very different from schools, senior choirs, jails, orphanages and so on. And the effect of this collaboration was a performance. The program was realized from 2012 till 2014 and was the first that big participatory project in Poland. Right now, after all these years, this Wielkopolska Rewolucje are criticized for lots of things, some kind of colonial approach to the subject, but Agata Siwiak is still working on the participatory field and changed her practices throughout experience and criticism. And she also is a coordinator of specialization on BA Theater Studies at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań, specialization about curating performance art, and she also teaches students a lot about what we here call theater, performing art in context. In her research and her projects, Agata Siwiak likes to use the term inclusive theater or inclusive theater collective, which she defines as focus on long-term collaboration of artists and non-actors, engaging people from different backgrounds and in hard economic, health or social situation. Aim of this collaboration is not only artistic, but also social and political activity, empowerment of marginalized groups and subjects. And the term inclusive is also used by Justyna Sobczyk, the leader and the founder of Teatr 21, Theatre 21 Theatre, a theater made by people with autism and Down syndrome. They exist from 2005. And right now, the members of Teatr 21 created a bigger thing, the Center of Including Art Downtown. They don't have a permanent space or resources. They have to collaborate with different public theaters, art galleries, and apply for refunds from the states. And their activity is focused on the problem of visibility and representation. Downtown published books, translates foreign articles, organized debates, conferences, workshops connected with the problem of visibility and the situation of people with disabilities in Poland. As you can expect, the economic and social situation of people with disabilities in Poland is catastrophic. And of course, public space is still not adapted for the people with alternative motility. Alternative motility is the term invented by Rafał Urbacki, a Polish choreographer and artist with disabilities, and I really like this term. So in public space in Poland, you don't see a lot of people with disabilities because of the shame and stigma and unadapted space. In 2018, people with disabilities and their families occupied the Polish parliament in act of protest against this horrifying social and economical situation. The occupation of this parliament lasted for 40 days, and during that time, the protesters was covered by the curtain in order to hide them. You can see that. The politician said that they are unpleasant to see, so they hide them when they occupied the parliament. So that's about visibility. After that, Justyna Sobczyk and Teatr 21 made a performance, Rewolucja, której nie było, Revolution That Didn't Happen, a very moving, funny and political performance about this protest and about these occupations and the reality of life of people with disabilities. I forgot to say, but I thought that it's obvious, the protest didn't gain anything, like the politicians didn't give anything to the protesters. So the last term I want to discuss is quite fresh. Right now, during the pandemic and lockdowns, lots of institutions, lots of artists are rethinking the ways of operations and the aim of their practice. And right now in Poland we have a huge debate about Me Too movement in theaters and art academies. There are lots of call-outs about and scandals about sexual harassment and mobbing in the institutions. And right now scholars and artists are using the tools from institutional critique to rethink the institution, to invent it in a new way. And one of the ideas is a term, a category invented by a Polish director, Lidia Zamkow, in the early 70s. In contrast of Jerzy Grotowski's theory of laboratory theater, she proposed theater of ambulatory care. In Polish it sounds teatr laboratorium versus teatr ambulatorium. Katarzyna Kułakowska, Katarzyna Kalinowska, Olga Drygas and Michał Bargielski in their article about Polish alternative theaters during the pandemic used this category, theater of ambulatory care, to describe the different model of working and making a performances, focused on creating a common space for healing, for tenderness, not exploiting people and resources. Theater of ambulatory care is open for new experiences and have no pressure to product masterpiece. They use low theory instead of high theory. And you can read about it more online. The article was published in Theatrical Memoir, Pamiętnik Teatralny, that I have an honor to be an editor. And it's translated into English. And I think that today the practice of ambulatory care, of caring about people, is probably the most important task that performative art have to face. Ambulatory care means also creating a new ideas for making theaters and society a better place, even if it's only for a short, ephemeral moment. So that's it. Thank you.
you so much, Stanislav, for this short but intense insight. Yes. So I say for this moment goodbye to all those who follow us via streaming, and hand you over to George and Milena in the Zoom to have your feedback space there. And we see us again, I guess 2:20 via stream for the second part of the country reports. And yes, goodbye, streaming people. And we're going to our debate in here.